The pen, a solid gold Mont Blanc, was poised just millimeters above the signature line. On the other side of that line, $150 million deal. Marcus Thorne, a man who built an empire from steel and foresight, was about to sign. But then, a whisper, sharp and urgent, cut through the opulent silence of the private dining room. A waitress, cleaning a spill, spoke in perfect, rapid Sicilian. "This is fake." In that instant, the waitress, Alessia Russo, didn't just save a billionaire from a catastrophic scam. She rewrote her own destiny. This is the story of the night a five-star con met a five-star waitress, and the empire that was saved by a single, whispered warning. Marcus Thorne didn't become a self-made billionaire by being careless. He was a man of cold logic, a predator in the world of mergers and acquisitions. His company, Thorne Global, was a titan of industry, its logo a stark T that graced skyscrapers from New York to Tokyo. Yet, on this rain-slicked Tuesday night, Marcus was not just a businessman. He was the grandson of a Sicilian immigrant, and he was being driven by something far more dangerous than logic: nostalgia. He sat in the most exclusive private room at Il Paradiso, a restaurant so renowned that reservations were often booked a year in advance. The room was a cocoon of wealth: mahogany-paneled walls, a crystal chandelier that cast soft, golden light, and a single priceless Renoir hanging opposite the table. Across from him sat Lorenzo Bianchi. Bianchi was, supposedly, the last scion of a noble Sicilian family. He was in Peck, New York tailored suit, a signet ring on his pinky, and an accent that dripped with old-world aristocracy. With him was his legal counsel, a quiet, nondescript man named Mr. Davies, who clung to his leather briefcase as if it contained state secrets. On the table between them lay a portfolio bound in green leather. Inside were the documents for the Villa Scordato. For months, Bianchi had been courting Marcus, spinning a tale of a long-lost estate near Palermo, a vineyard and villa that had been in his family for 5 centuries. He claimed, due to complex zoning laws and a bit of local influence, that he held the exclusive rights to redevelop it into the most luxurious resort in the Mediterranean. It was a $150 million investment. For Marcus, it was personal. His grandfather, Nonno Antonio, had been a penniless farmhand from a village near Palermo. Owning the Villa Scordato wouldn't just be an investment, it would be a monument to his family's journey. It was the one deal his executive board had warned him against. Too much money, too many handshake agreements in a foreign jurisdiction. "Marcus," Lorenzo said, his voice smooth as the $5,000 a bottle Barolo they were drinking. "This is more than a deal. It is a return to your heritage, a legacy." Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. He wanted to believe. The final transfer papers were ready. All he had to do was sign, and his personal bank would authorize the wire. He didn't notice the waitress. Her name was Alessia Russo. She was just one of the many black and white clad servers at Il Paradiso, moving with silent, practiced efficiency. But Alessia was not just a waitress. She was a scholar of human nature, a student of the invisible, and, most importantly, she was from Palermo, Sicily. Alessia was sharp. She'd put her own dreams on hold, a degree in forensic accounting, to work 2 jobs, sending every spare dollar back home to her family in Sicily. Her mother needed surgery, and her younger brother's small panificio, bakery, was struggling. Alessia lived in a cramped apartment in Queens, worlds away from the luxury she served every night. She had been assigned the Thorne party. From the moment they sat down, her instincts had been screaming. It wasn't one big thing. It was 1,000 tiny ones. Alessia's training was to be invisible, to anticipate a need before it was spoken, to refill a water glass without a sound, to clear a plate the moment it was finished. This invisibility was her greatest tool. It made people forget she was there. It made them careless. She'd been listening. The first red flag was Lorenzo Bianchi's Italian. He spoke it beautifully, fluently. But it was the clean, academic Italian of a language school in Florence. When he'd taken a call earlier, thinking he was private, his accent had wavered, a hard, vaguely Eastern European consonant slipping in where a soft Italian one should have been. But the real alarm bell was his Sicilian. Twice, Bianchi had tried to impress Marcus with a charming, local phrase. He'd raised his glass and said, "Saluti, amuni." Amuni, the Sicilian word for "let's go." But he'd pronounced it amune, stretching the vowels like a tourist. Alessia's grandmother, her nonna Sofia, would have cuffed him on the back of the head. It was emuni, a sharp, quick command. It was a small thing, but it was wrong. Later, when describing the rugged beauty of the land, he'd said, "Ah, the cupola on the hills." Alessia almost dropped her tray. A cupola was the traditional flat cap worn by Sicilian men. He meant coppa, the peak. He had used a word for a hat to describe a mountain. Alessia watched him. He was a performer, and his stage was this dinner. Mr. Davies, the lawyer, was even more unsettling. He said nothing, drank only water, and his eyes never stopped moving. He wasn't watching the room. He was scanning for exits, security cameras, and weak points. He wasn't a lawyer. He was a handler. Now, as Alessia moved in to clear the dessert plates, the mood in the room had shifted. The time for charming was over. The green leather portfolio was open. "The wire transfer is staged and ready, Marcus," Mr. Davies said, his first real contribution to the conversation. His voice was flat, American. "Once you sign the authorization, my bank will release the digital keys to the holding company. The transfer is instantaneous and irreversible." Irreversible. The word hung in the air, a metallic, final sound. Marcus Thorne picked up the pen. It was a custom Mont Blanc, a gift from Bianchi. A very, very expensive pen. "To legacy," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "To legacy," Bianchi echoed, his smile wide and triumphant. His eyes, however, were cold. They weren't looking at Marcus. They were looking at the pen, urging it towards the paper. Alessia, standing just behind Marcus's right shoulder, saw the final document. It was titled, "Final Deed of Transfer, Villa Scordato Regional Authority of Palermo." And that's when she saw it. It wasn't the legalese. It was the letterhead. At the top was the official seal of the Regione Siciliana, a triskelion, the three-legged symbol of Sicily, with the head of Medusa surrounded by wheat. But Alessia, who had just renewed her brother's bakery license with that same authority, knew that seal better than she knew her own face. The wheat was wrong. The grains were too thick. The Medusa's eye was slightly off-center. But the fatal flaw, the one that made her blood run cold, was the eagle. The Comune di Palermo, the city of Palermo, used a separate seal, an eagle. Sometimes regional documents combined them. This one had. But the eagle on this document was the German imperial eagle, a sharp, modern-looking bird. The Palermo eagle was older, prouder, facing the other way. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a forgery, a lazy forgery. A forgery made by someone who had Googled official Sicilian seal and picked the one that looked most impressive. They were scamming him, and they were using her home, her heritage, as the bait. A sudden, hot wave of Sicilian anger, a deep, protective fury, washed over her. She thought of her nonna, who always said, "A Sicilian can forgive an insult, but never a fraud." Marcus Thorne's hand was moving. The pen was descending. She had 1 second, Alessia's mind raced. Call security? They would just escort her out. Shout? She'd be fired before the word left her mouth, and the men would dismiss her as a hysterical waitress. She had to stop the signature, but she had to do it in a way that only Marcus Thorne would understand. She acted. With a deft, practiced movement that looked like a stumble, Alessia lunked forward, her hand, accidentally, striking the silver carafe of ice water on the service tray. "Oh, Dio mio!" she cried out, a performance of clumsiness. Ice water, and the heavy silver carafe itself, crashed onto the table, splashing directly onto the green leather portfolio. "What the?" Davies half yelled, jumping back as water soaked his suit. "My apologies! Mi scusi, signore!" Alessia gushed, grabbing a stack of linen napkins. The chaos was instant. Bianchi was on his feet, furious. "You clumsy!" "It's just water, Lorenzo. Calm down," Marcus said, annoyed but unshaken. The signature page itself, which he had been holding, was mostly dry. He was dabbing at it with his own napkin. This was her window. It was now or never. Alessia rushed to Marcus's side, ostensibly to blot the water that had splashed near his lap and onto the precious documents. She leaned in low, her head near his, her hands working furiously with the napkins. The room was filled with Davies's sputtering and Bianchi's angry muttering in Florentine, Italian to the restaurant manager, who had just burst in. Under the cover of the noise, Alessia spoke. She didn't speak English. She didn't speak the high, proper Italian that Bianchi used. She spoke the language of her ancestors, the language of the Palermo streets, a rapid, guttural, and utterly indecipherable Sicilian dialect. "Signore Thorne," she whispered, her voice low and urgent, not even looking at his face, her eyes fixed on the spill she was cleaning. Marcus Thorne froze. His hand, holding the pen, stopped moving. He hadn't heard that dialect in 30 years. Not since his nonno had rocked him on his knee, telling him old stories. He hadn't even known he still understood it. Alessia kept speaking, her words a torrent. "Non firmare, è una truffa. Cistu è falso. Don't sign, it's a scam. This is fake." Marcus's head turned just a fraction. His eyes met hers. He saw no apology in them, only a fierce, burning certainty. "What?" he breathed, his voice almost inaudible. "Il sigillo," she whispered, her finger subtly brushing the letterhead she had just blotted. "L'Aquila. È tedesca, non siciliana. È una truffa. Ti stanno fottendo." The seal, the eagle. It's German, not Sicilian. It's a scam. They are screwing you. The raw, crude language of the docks, coming from this pristine waitress, hit Marcus like a physical blow. No one had ever spoken to him like that, and no one had ever been so honest. "Get her out of here," Bianchi roared, turning back to the table. He had seen the intimate whisper, the way Thorne had frozen. "Are you insane? We are in the middle of a—" "Shut up, Lorenzo." Marcus Thorne's voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a shard of ice. He stood up slowly. The emotional, nostalgic grandson was gone. In his place was the CEO of Thorne Global, the man who had broken hedge funds and toppled competitors. He looked at Alessia. He didn't speak. He just gave a single, curt nod. "I understand." He then turned his gaze to Lorenzo Bianchi. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "A German eagle," Marcus said in English, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. Bianchi's face, which had been red with anger, went stark white. I don't know what you're talking about," Lorenzo stammered. The mask of the aristocrat was cracking, revealing the cheap plaster underneath. "This woman, she is clearly hysterical. She's ruined the documents." "She's right," Marcus said, tapping the damp letterhead. "I was so blinded by the story of this place, I didn't even look at the details." He looked at Alessia. My grandfather was from Palermo. He always told me, trust the man who can spot a fake eagle. It was a lie. His grandfather had never said that. But it was a test. Alessia didn't blink. Your grandfather was a wise man, signore. He would also know that a scordato, it is not a proud name. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? Bianchi said it was an old, noble family. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped Alessia. No, signore. In Sicilian, scordato means forgotten. Or more to the point, the one who has been forgotten. It is a name given to orphans, to foundlings. There is no noble scordato family. There is no Villa Scordato. It's a name from a sad story. Not a deed. Every word was a nail in Lorenzo Bianchi's coffin. The con artist, because that's what he clearly was now sweating profusely. His expensive suit suddenly looked like a costume. This is preposterous. I will not be insulted by a cameriera, he spat, using the Italian word for waitress. But you will be insulted by me, Marcus said. He pulled his phone from his pocket. Robert, he said into the phone, speaking to his head of security, who was waiting in the lobby. I need you in the private dining room. Now. And call the NYPD. Tell them to bring the fraud squad. This is when Mr. Davies, the silent lawyer, finally moved. But he didn't move toward the door. He snapped his briefcase open on the chair. His movements were no longer quiet. They were violent and precise. He wasn't a lawyer. He was a tech operator. We're blown, Davies hissed at Bianchi. He wasn't fumbling with papers. He was pulling out a small, lethal-looking device, a high-speed hard drive eraser, and a powerful signal jammer. You're not calling anyone, Davies said, his voice no longer flat, but filled with a cold, menacing energy. He activated the jammer. The cellular bars on Marcus's phone vanished. The wire transfer isn't just staged, Davies explained, his fingers flying over a small laptop he'd pulled from the briefcase. It's on a dead man's switch. If I don't confirm your signature within the next 60 seconds, the $150 million automatically transfers anyway, as a default penalty for breach of contract, a clause I'm sure you didn't read. Marcus stared. He hadn't read the fine print. His personal lawyers had, but he had overruled their concerns. He had been scammed, thoroughly. You can't do this, Marcus said, his voice losing its iron confidence for the first time. I just did. Checkmate, Mr. Thorne. Davies smiled. The money is gone. No, it's not, Alessia said. Both men turned to look at her. She was standing by the service panel near the door, where the room's lights and music were controlled. This room, Alessia said, her voice calm and steady, is an old bank vault. Il Paradiso was built in the 1920s. The walls are 3 feet thick, steel reinforced. Your little jammer works on cell signals, certo. But this room is hardwired. I've been pressing the silent alarm button for the last 30 seconds. Davies's smile vanished. And, Alessia continued, pointing to a small, blinking red light on his laptop, this room has its own dedicated Ethernet port. My manager, when he ran in, I told him to cut the hard line. Your dead man's switch just lost its connection to the internet. She had not just seen the scam. She had analyzed the entire room's technical infrastructure in the time it took them to panic. The forensic accountant had finally emerged. The door to the dining room burst open. It wasn't the manager this time. It was Robert, Marcus's head of security, a mountain of a man, followed by 2 uniformed NYPD officers who had been dining in the main restaurant by chance. Lorenzo Bianchi, the last scion, put his hands in the air. Mr. Davies, the tech expert, lunged, but he didn't lunge for the door. He lunged for Alessia. Davies was fast. He was a cornered rat, and he knew his life was over. He grabbed Alessia, pulling her in front of him as a human shield, one arm clamped around her throat. "Nobody move!" he screamed, his voice a panicked shriek. He'd dropped the laptop, but he had a small, sharp object in his hand, a USB stick, pointed and hard. He pressed it against her neck. "Back off! Get them out!" The officers drew their weapons. "Let her go, son! No, you let us go! We walk out of here!" Marcus was frozen. This was his fault, his ego, his nostalgia. He had brought this danger, and this woman, this brave, brilliant woman, was going to pay the price. "Let her go," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "Take the money. I'll reauthorize the transfer. You can have it." "It's too late for that," Davies yelled, dragging Alessia backward. "The transfer is dead. The account is flagged. We're finished." Alessia was struggling to breathe, her hands clawing at the thick arm around her neck. But she wasn't panicking. She was thinking. She was a waitress. She carried a corkscrew, a small, simple, 3-point leverage corkscrew in her apron pocket. Her hand, which Davies thought was flailing uselessly, was slowly, agonizingly, working its way into her pocket. "He's right, Signore Thorne," she choked out, a gurgling, painful sound. "It's too late for him." Davies tightened his grip. "Shut up. He's a babu," she gasped. A fool, and with a surge of adrenaline, she jammed her knee backward as hard as she could into Davies's groin. It was a good shot, but he was expecting it, twisting his body. He grunted in pain, but didn't release her. But it was the opening she needed. As he twisted, her hand found the corkscrew. She didn't pull out the knife. She didn't unfold the lever. She grabbed the entire solid steel object and jammed her hand backward, driving the spiraled, pointed worm of the corkscrew directly into Davies's thigh. It wasn't a stab, it was a twist. Davies roared, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony, and his arm flew open. Alessia didn't hesitate. She didn't run. She dropped to the floor, rolling away from him and toward the officers. In that same second, Robert, Marcus's security guard, moved. He didn't bother with the door. He simply charged. Robert, a former All-Pro linebacker, hit the screaming tech expert like a freight train. The sound of Davies hitting the mahogany wall echoed through the room like a gunshot. He didn't get up. Lorenzo Bianchi, who had been watching this with wide-eyed terror, fainted. He just buckled at the knees and collapsed into a heap of expensive wool. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the room was Alessia, on her hands and knees, coughing and gasping for breath, the corkscrew still clutched in her hand. Marcus Thorne rushed to her side, his $5,000 suit sinking onto the expensive rug. "Miss Russo? Alessia? Are you all right?" She looked up at him. Her neck was already forming a dark, ugly bruise. Her hair was a mess. There were tears in her eyes, but they weren't from fear. They were from rage. He spilled the Barolo," she coughed, pointing at the toppled bleeding bottle. "That's a $5,000 stain." Marcus stared at her for a beat. Then, for the first time in what felt like a decade, the billionaire threw back his head and laughed. It was a raw, genuine, relieved laugh. "Alessia," he said, helping her to her feet, his hands shaking slightly. "I think we can cover the bill." The next 3 hours were a blur of flashing blue lights, forensics teams, and grim-faced detectives. Il Paradiso was, for the first time in its history, closed by the NYPD. The scam unraveled quickly. Lorenzo Bianchi was actually Arthur Finch, a disgraced British actor with a talent for mimicry and a history of high-level confidence games. Mr. Davies was a wanted hacker named Kevin Porch, who specialized in ghosting crypto wallets. The Villa Scordato didn't exist. The $150 million was intended to be routed through a shell company in the Cayman Islands then instantly split into 500 different untraceable cryptocurrency accounts, vanishing forever. The forged documents, the bespoke suits, the 5,000 bottle of wine as a prop. It was all part of a sophisticated, multi-million-dollar theatrical production, and it had all been brought down by a 15-an-hour waitress with a good memory. Marcus sat with Alessia in the restaurant's main office, a small, cramped room that smelled like printer toner and old coffee. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving them both exhausted. The police had taken their statements. Marcus had his real legal team, a pack of wolves from the firm of Cravath, Swain and Moore, handling the fallout. Alessia was nursing a cup of hot, sweet tea, a blanket draped over her shoulders. A red mark was visible on her throat, but she had refused medical attention. They fired me, she said quietly, staring into the cup. Marcus snapped his head up. What? The manager, Mr. Lacroix. He said I compromised the integrity of the private dining experience, and that I assaulted a guest with the corkscrew. Marcus felt a surge of cold fury that was entirely different from the fear he'd felt earlier. Robert, he said to his guard, who was standing by the door. Sir, by the restaurant. Robert blinked. Sir, by this restaurant. Find Mr. Lacroix. Tell him he has 1 hour to accept my offer. Then, after he accepts, tell him he's fired for compromising the integrity of my employee. Yes, sir, Robert said, a small smile playing on his lips. He walked out of the office. Marcus turned back to Alessia. She was staring at him, her mouth open. You can't be serious, she whispered. I have never been more serious, Marcus said. But that's not why I'm here. I wanted to talk to you. He leaned forward. Why did you do it, Alessia? You had nothing to gain, and you just saw what you had to lose. Your job, your safety. Alessia took a slow sip of her tea. She thought about her nonna in Palermo. She thought about her brother's struggling bakery. She thought about the degree she'd had to abandon. You're wrong, Mr. Thorne, she said. I had everything to lose. He looked confused. You mean the tip? She almost laughed. No, my integrity, my home. Those men, they weren't just stealing from you. They were stealing from me. They were using my home, my language, my culture as a costume to commit a crime. They were poisoning my heritage to line their pockets. She put the cup down, her hand steady. My father, she said, her voice quiet but strong, was scammed back in Sicily. A nice man from Milan sold him a fake supply contract. It ruined him. We lost our shop. I watched it happen. I swore I would never, ever let that happen again. Not if I could help it. I spent the last 5 years studying. I may be a waitress, but I was in my final year of a forensic accounting degree at NYU before I had to drop out to help my family. Marcus was silent. He was looking at her not as a waitress, or a victim, or a hero. He was looking at her as an asset. Forensic accounting, he repeated. Yes. I look at the numbers. I look for the things that don't add up. The German eagle, the orphan's name, the Florentine accent. My due diligence team, Marcus said, rubbing his temples. A team of 30 people with a budget of $2 million missed all of that. They saw the projected returns. They didn't see the German eagle. They weren't Sicilian, Alessia said simply. Marcus nodded slowly. No, they weren't. He stood up. Alessia, I owe you a debt I can't repay. But I'm going to try. A reward. It feels cheap. A check doesn't cover what you did. I don't want a reward, Mr. Thorne. I know, he said. That's why I'm offering you a job, and not at this restaurant. The next 3 hours were a disorienting, fluorescent-lit blur. The velvet and mahogany cocoon of Il Paradiso was torn open, its quiet opulence violated by the harsh squawk of police radios and the methodical, detached movements of the forensics team. The rain outside had turned into a full-blown thunderstorm, the flashes of lightning occasionally overwhelming the blue and red lights that painted the restaurant's facade. Lorenzo Bianchi, whose real name was discovered to be Arthur Finch, a disgraced British actor with a penchant for high-stakes fraud, had been taken away in handcuffs, still theatrically lamenting the injustice of it all. His partner, the man they knew as Mr. Davies, real name Kevin Porch, a wanted tech fugitive from a 2021 crypto wallet heist, had been loaded into an ambulance, his leg stabilized, and his face a mask of silent, seething rage. His lunge at Alessia had been his last, desperate act. Marcus and Alessia were sequestered in the restaurant's main office, a cramped, windowless room that smelled of printer toner, stale coffee, and garlic from the kitchen vents. It was a stark, functional box, a world away from the luxury being catalogued by the NYPD just outside the door. Alessia sat on a rickety office chair, a thick wool blanket, the kind kept for patrons who found the air conditioning too cold, draped over her shoulders. She was nursing a cup of heavily sweetened tea, the restaurant's finest oolong, but the delicate china felt absurd in her trembling hands. Her neck throbbed with a dull, insistent pain, a tapestry of purple and red already blooming where Porch's arm had clamped her. Marcus Thorne, the billionaire, sat opposite her, on an equally undignified chair, his $5,000 suit jacket slung over the back. His tie was loosened, his collar unbuttoned. He looked, for the first time that night, utterly exhausted. He was on the phone, his voice a low, hard monotone. "No, I don't care what the Times is saying. You kill the story. Kill it. Call David. I don't care if he's in surgery. Get him on the phone. This is not a Thorne global incident. This was a personal matter. Yes, personal. I'll handle the fallout. Just make it go away." He hung up, not with a tap, but with a jab of his finger, as if trying to physically punish the device. He scrubbed his face with both hands, the sound rough in the small room. He looked across at Alessia. She was staring at the wall, her gaze unfocused. "Miss Russo," he began, his voice softer. "Alessia, the detectives are done with you for tonight. My head of security, Robert, will take you home. My personal physician will meet you there, just to—" The office door opened with a sharp, officious squeak. Standing in the doorway was Mr. Lacroix, the restaurant's manager. He was a tall, rail-thin man whose face, even in a crisis, seemed permanently pinched in a state of disapproval. He had been grilled by the police for 2 hours, and his legendary composure was gone, replaced by a raw, frantic anger. He completely ignored Marcus Thorne. His eyes, small and dark, zeroed in on Alessia. "You!" Lacroix snapped, his voice a venomous whisper. "You are finished." Alessia looked up, her expression a mix of exhaustion and confusion. "Mr. Lacroix? You are fired. Effective immediately. You brought this circus into my establishment. You violated protocol. You assaulted a guest." Marcus stood up. He didn't stand up quickly. He unfolded, a slow, deliberate movement that seemed to suck the air out of the room. He was a full head taller than Lacroix, and where the manager was made of frantic energy, Marcus was suddenly a block of granite. "What did you just say?" Marcus's voice was not loud. It was terrifyingly quiet. Lacroix, realizing his tactical error in ignoring the billionaire, faltered, but his anger held. "Mr. Thorne, this is an internal staff matter. This employee not only failed to alert management or security, she took it upon herself to engage. She caused this chaos, We have a reputation. You have a reputation for serving wine, Lacroix, Marcus cut in, his voice like dry ice. She, on the other hand, just saved me $150 million, and you're firing her for it. She assaulted a patron with a corkscrew, Lacroix sputtered. That patron was a violent felon who, if you hadn't noticed, was attempting to kidnap or kill her, Marcus said. A fact you'd know if you hadn't been cowering in the wine cellar. Lacroix's face went white. Robert, Marcus called, his voice never rising. His head of security, who had been standing just outside the hall, filled the doorway. Sir? Mr. Lacroix here is under the impression that he still has a job. Lacroix's jaw dropped. What? You can't... I can, Marcus said. I just got off the phone with my attorney, who has been in contact with the owners of this restaurant. A lovely couple currently on their yacht in Fiji. They were distressed. To learn their establishment was used as the centerpiece for a 9-figure international fraud scheme. He took a step closer to Lacroix. So I made them an offer. A very, very generous offer. For the building, the brand, the kitchen, and everything in it. As of 5 minutes ago, I own Il Paradiso. Alessia's head snapped up. She stared at him, her cup of tea frozen halfway to her lips. Robert, Marcus continued, his eyes locked on the trembling manager. Please escort Mr. Lacroix off my property. Inform him that his severance will be calculated and sent to his home. Tell him he has 1 hour to clear his personal effects, after which he will be considered a trespasser. He is fired. For let's say... Marcus glanced at Alessia. For compromising the integrity of my new employee. Yes, sir, Robert said, with just a hint of a smile. He put a hand, the size of a dinner plate, on Lacroix's shoulder. You can't do this, Lacroix shrieked, but his voice was thin. This is my life. It's just business, Marcus said, turning his back on him. Robert, now. The sounds of Lacroix's protests faded down the hall. The door clicked shut, plunging the office back into silence, broken only by the hum of the mini-fridge and the distant sound of the rain. Marcus sat down heavily. He looked at Alessia, who was staring at him as if he had just grown a second head. You bought the restaurant? She whispered. It was an impulse, Marcus said, waving a hand dismissively. A bad investment. I'll sell it by the end of the quarter. The point is, you are not fired. He leaned forward, the exhaustion returning, but now it was mixed with an intense, penetrating curiosity. Which brings me back to the question the police and Lacroix and my entire legal team have been asking. Why, Alessia? Why did you do it? He shook his head, anticipating her answer. And don't tell me it was the right thing to do. I've been in boardrooms my whole life. The right thing is a luxury most people can't afford. You had everything to lose. Your job, your safety, your life. Why would you risk that for me? A man you're paid to serve filet mignon to. Alessia put the teacup down on the desk with a clatter. The question seemed to break the dam of her shock. A different kind of anger, a slow, burning kind, replaced the fear in her eyes. Because I was angry, she said, her voice low. Because it wasn't. It wasn't just your money. It was... They were stealing. People steal every day, Marcus countered. Not like that, she said, her voice rising. They weren't just stealing from you. They were stealing from me. They were using my home, my language, my nonna's words. They were twisting my culture, my heritage, into a costume, a cheap party trick to get your money. They took the name Scordato, a name of orphans, a name of sadness, and tried to sell it to you as a noble estate. They poisoned it. She stood up, the blanket falling to the floor. She began to pace the tiny office. "You don't understand, Mr. Thorne. I've seen this before. I've seen what men like that do." "What do you mean?" She stopped pacing and looked at him, her eyes bright with an old, deep pain. "You asked why I'm a waitress. Why I'm not more. I was more. I was in my final year at NYU. Forensic accounting. I was top of my class." "Forensic accounting?" Marcus repeated, his curiosity now fully piqued. "Finding the truth in the lies," she said. "Finding the story that the numbers try to hide. I was good at it. I am good at it. But I had to drop out. Why? Because of a man just like Bianchi, just like Finch. My father," she said, her voice catching for the first time. "He owned a small bakery back in Palermo, our family's shop, Panificio Russo. It had been in our family for 3 generations. He wasn't a rich man, but he was a proud man. He made the best cannoli in the city." She smiled, a tiny, heart-breaking smile. "Then he came, a nice man from Milan, drove a shiny Alfa Romeo, wore a beautiful suit. He told my father he was an investor. He wanted to help him expand. He showed him papers, contracts, projections, all in technical, high Italian legalese that my father, who speaks in dialect, couldn't really understand. But he was so charming. He called my father fratello, brother." She swiped at her eyes, her anger returning. "The man from Milan had him sign a contract for a new, high-tech oven. A miracle from Germany. It would double his output. My father paid the deposit, all our savings, and he took out a loan, using the bakery as collateral. The man said the loan was just a formality." "The oven never came," Marcus said, his voice a low rumble. "No," Alessia whispered. "The man from Milan vanished. The contract, it turned out, wasn't for an oven. It was a transfer of debt. The loan was with a shark, not a bank. The formality was the default clause. We lost everything. The bakery, our home, my father's, his pride. He was a baker. Now he sweeps floors at the fish market. A man of 60, sweeping up fish guts because he trusted a nice man in a nice suit." She turned to Marcus, her face a mask of fierce, defiant integrity. "I couldn't finish my degree because every dollar I make from this job, from my other job cleaning offices, goes home. To pay for my mother's medicine. To keep my brother, who's trying to start his own panificio from a tiny cart, from falling into the same trap." She finally ran out of steam, breathing hard. She leaned against the filing cabinet. "So when I heard that babu, Bianchi, using my language to sell you a lie, when I saw that fake eagle, I wasn't seeing a bad forgery. I was seeing the man from Milan. I was seeing his shiny shoes and his fake smile. I was seeing my father's face when the bank seized his shop." She looked Marcus dead in the eye. "I didn't do it for you, Mr. Thorne. I did it for my father. I did it because I have spent the last 5 years of my life studying how to find men like that and tear their lies apart, piece by piece. Tonight, I just got to do it in person, and with a corkscrew." There was a long, profound silence in the room. Marcus Thorne looked at this woman, this force. He had a due diligence team of 30 people. He had lawyers from Cravath, Swain and Moore on a $20 million a year retainer. He had a $2 million a year budget for risk assessment. And all of them, had missed what this waitress, earning 15 nasaldalos an hour plus tips, had seen in a single glance. They saw the projected returns. She saw the German eagle. They heard legacy. She heard the orphan's name. They heard a charming accent. She heard a hat on a mountain. He had been processing his own failure all night, His arrogance, his vulnerability to a story, a nostalgic fantasy his nonno would have laughed at. He had been so obsessed with proving he was still the Sicilian grandson that he had forgotten to be the American businessman. And this woman, she was both. She was the heart of Sicily and the mind of New York. "Alessia," he said, his voice different. All exhaustion was gone, replaced by a clear, sharp energy. "You are not a waitress." "Today," she said, shrugging. "I'm not even that." "No," he said, standing up again. "You're a forensic accountant who's been massively underpaid, and you've been working for the wrong people." He pulled his phone back out. He tapped a number from his favorites. "Michael, wake up. I don't care what time it is in London. Yes, it's about the Palermo incident. No, it's contained. In fact, it's solved. I need you to draw up a contract, a new hire. Right. Chief Risk Assessment Officer, European Division. No, this isn't for the division. This is to lead the division. Salary? Start at, I don't know, make it 7 figures. And a signing bonus. I'll text you the details. Yes, now, Michael. Thank you." He hung up and looked at Alessia. She was chalk white. "Mr. Thorne, what are you doing? I can't." "You're right," he said. "That was presumptuous." He turned to his phone again. "Robert, bring me a pen and some paper. Not my checkbook, just a plain piece of paper from the front desk." He turned back to her. "I'm not offering you a reward, Miss Russo. A check for $1 million would be an insult. It would be paying you for a service, and what you did tonight wasn't a service. It was an intervention. Mr. Thorne, I am offering you a job, a real one. My European acquisitions division is a mess. It's run by men like me, old, emotional, blinded by their own stories. They're surrounded by yes men. I need a no woman. I need someone who can walk into a room, listen to a perfect pitch, and have the guts to find the lie. I need someone who checks the seals. I need someone who can tell me when I'm being an idiot." I don't have my degree," she stammered, the reality of what he was saying overwhelming her. "I don't have an MBA. I don't speak. I don't know." "You have a degree in truth," Marcus said, not unkindly. "You have a PhD in character. You just passed the most expensive bar exam in the world, the one that cost me $150 million not to lose. As for the rest, the corporate nonsense, the spreadsheets, you're a forensic accountant. You'll learn it in a week." Robert entered and handed Marcus a simple ballpoint pen and a sheet of Il Paradiso letterhead. Marcus scribbled on it. "Thorne Global, 80th floor. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. He tore it off and handed it to her. "That's my offer. Head of Internal Audit and Risk Assessment, European Ventures. You'll have a staff of 5 and a budget to hire your own team. You will report directly to me. You will have the power to veto any deal, including my own. If you find a German eagle, you kill the deal. No questions asked." Alessia stared at the paper. It was shaking. This is insane. It's charity." "Charity?" Marcus let out a short, barked laugh. "Ms. Russo, do you have any idea what my company's insurance premiums are going to be after tonight? Do you know what my board would do if they found out I nearly torched 9 figures on a fake Italian villa? You, sitting in that chair, are the single greatest insurance policy I could ever buy. This isn't charity. This is the most brutal, cost-effective, selfish business decision I have made in a decade." He waited. She was still hesitating, her mind clearly reeling. "What is it?" he asked. "My family," she whispered. "My father. My brother. This is a different world. I can't just—" "Ah," Marcus said. He understood. He pulled out his phone again and tapped on his phone. Michael? One more thing. I'm texting you a name. Russo, in Palermo. I want every one of their debts, personal and professional, cleared by the time the banks open in Sicily. Yes, all of them. Set up a trust for the Panificio Russo. Fund it, 500,000. No, make it 1 million. Just get it done. He hung up and looked at her. Her face was a mask of disbelief, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. The tuition fund for your NYU degree is already being processed, he said gently. You can finish it at night. Or not, I don't care. Your family is taken care of. Your father's loan will be paid. The man from Milan can't hurt him anymore. I don't have a suit, Alessia whispered. It was the only thing her brain could manage, the most absurd, practical, human objection. A rare, genuine smile broke across Marcus Thorne's face. My driver will pick you up at 7 a.m., he said. We'll stop at Bergdorf's. They open at 8 for me. He extended his hand. Do we have a deal, Miss Russo? I need a yes. My entire European portfolio is at a standstill until I get one. Alessia looked at his outstretched hand, the hand that had, just hours ago, been poised to sign away a fortune, the hand that was now offering her, not just a job, but a restoration, justice, a new life built on the very truth she had fought for. She wiped her tears away with the back of her hand, smearing a bit of grime from the floor. She stood up straight, pulling the tattered remnants of her waitress uniform taut. She did not shake his hand. Instead, she picked up the Il Paradiso pen from the desk. She turned over the piece of paper he had given her. On the blank back, she wrote a single word. Accetto. I accept. And beside it, she signed her name. I'll see you at 9, Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice no longer a whisper. It was a statement. But I'll be reading the fine print on my contract first. Marcus Thorne looked at the signature. He looked at her. The waitress was gone. The executive had arrived. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that his empire was finally safe. Robert, he called out, a new energy in his voice. Make sure Bergdorf's knows. Miss Russo needs a suit and a briefcase. A very, very large one. 6 months later, the 80th floor conference room at Thorne Global was silent. Marcus Thorne sat at the head of a long, glass table, surrounded by the 12 members of his executive board. At the far end, a team of bankers from a prestigious Swiss firm had just finished a 90-minute presentation. The deal was for a chain of luxury hotels in the Alps. The numbers were perfect. The projections were astronomical. The board was visibly excited. Well, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair, it certainly looks promising. A 40% ROI in 3 years. Gentlemen, thank you. The bankers preened, beginning to pack their briefcases. One last audit, Marcus said, holding up a hand. Before we vote. He nodded to the side. The conference room doors opened. Alessia Russo walked in. She was not the same woman from Il Paradiso. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek, professional bun. She wore a dark, impeccably tailored Armani suit. She walked with a quiet, unshakable confidence that commanded the room. In her hand, she held a single red folder. She didn't look at the bankers. She walked to the head of the table and placed the folder in front of Marcus. Good morning, gentlemen, she said, her voice clear and cool. Mr. Thorne. She turned to the Swiss bankers, who were now looking at her with confusion. A beautiful presentation, she said, her English perfect. The properties are indeed magnificent. The projections are optimistic. She tapped the folder. Unfortunately, you seem to have omitted a few key details. For instance, the geological survey you provided for the Chamonix property. It's a copy-paste from a 2018 survey of a property in Austria. You just changed the dates." The lead banker's smile froze. "And the local permits for the Zermatt resort?" Alessia continued, her voice turning to ice. "They were signed by a local official who was removed from office 2 years ago for bribery. And my personal favorite. The holding company you're using? Edelweiss Holdings?" She projected a document onto the main screen. It was a complex web of shell corporations. It's owned by the same shell consortium that Arthur Finch and Kevin Porch used for their Villa Scordato scam 6 months ago. You've been siphoning money from this bank for 5 years. The room was in stunned silence. The bankers had gone from white to a sickly shade of green. "You didn't just walk into this room to scam Mr. Thorne," Alessia said, her voice dropping. "You walked into this room to cover your own tracks, hoping he'd buy your toxic assets before they imploded." She turned to Marcus. "Mr. Thorne, my official recommendation is not only to veto this deal, but to have our legal team contact the Swiss Financial Market Supervisory Authority. Immediately." Marcus looked at the bankers, then at Alessia. He picked up the red folder, closed it, and handed it back to her. "Thank you, Ms. Russo. Your audit is, as always, thorough." He stood up and looked at the terrified bankers. "Gentlemen, I believe my head of risk assessment has concluded our meeting. Robert," he said to his security chief, "if you'd be so kind as to show these men to the waiting room. The one without the phones. The NYPD fraud squad is already on their way up." As the bankers were escorted out, the room erupted. The board members were on their feet, all talking at once. Marcus just watched Alessia as she calmly collected her notes. She had saved him again. Not $150 million this time, but closer to $500 million. She paused at the door and looked back at him. She gave him a small, respectful nod. He nodded back. The waitress was gone, the executive had arrived, and the empire of Marcus Thorne, built on steel and logic, was now secured by something even stronger, the unshakable integrity of a woman who knew the difference between a fake and the real thing. And that's the story of how a single warning, spoken in a language of truth, changed everything. Alessia Russo didn't just save Marcus Thorne's money, she saved his legacy. She reminded him that the most valuable assets aren't on a balance sheet. They are integrity, observation, and the courage to speak up when something is wrong. It's a powerful reminder that the most overlooked person in the room is often the most observant. The world is full of Lorenzo Bianchis, but it is also full of Alessia Russos, people with integrity, just waiting for the chance to prove it. What did you think of Alessia's quick thinking? Have you ever been in a situation where your gut feeling told you something was wrong? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and a well-deserved new beginning, please show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves a great twist, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story. Thank you for listening.